I always encourage people who are investing to do a basic SWOT analysis because it forces you to look at the bad and good sides of a project. Many people will only go into a project saying it's a scam, it's bad, and so they won't look at the strengths and opportunities. Others will go the other way and say it's so great and awesome that they won't look at the weaknesses and threats. So when you draw up a SWOT analysis, it forces you to objectively look at some of the things that are happening in this project. And as a result, I've created a SWOT analysis for the PulseChain project. Now, for your reference also, typically when you're doing a SWOT analysis, I'm putting on my business background hat now, the strengths and weaknesses, they're pretty much internal to the company, and the opportunities and threats, they're external to the company. There is some overlap in everything that we talk about here, but keep that in mind. Everything on the left side of the matrix is very much internal, whilst on the right side, it's external, the top row being strong and the bottom row being weak. So let's look at some of these strengths. First of all, the founder. Now, the founder, as we've spoken about, is Richard Hart, and he's created an immense amount of trust in the community. Before Hex launched, we talk about Hex a lot because Richard Hart created Hex. He got immense pushback from, I guess, the normies in the crypto space. He got regularly accused of being a scammer. And fast forward, I think 3 or 4 years from when he first started talking about it, he's made a lot of money for a lot of people, and he hasn't done a rug pull. So he was accused of taking all the Ethereum, doing a rug pull, being a scammer, taking the money and running, and none of it has come true. In fact, the opposite has come true. He has made a lot of people a lot of money. He hasn't run away. He hasn't done a rug pull, and he is now going into more projects. That is the PulseChain project, and he'll be doing another one after this without a doubt because he's an entrepreneur who will never retire. As I said in the beginning of this presentation, he said he had retired, but someone like Richard Hart will never retire. He will always work, but because he loves what he does, I don't think he ever feels like he's actually working. He's good at what he does. He loves what he does, and many people now trust him immensely and will follow him, I don't want to say almost blindly, because he has proven that he can be trusted. He has proven through Hex what can be done. And as a result, he has now some very smart people following him, immensely smart people following him, because they can push past the arguably arrogant side when they first meet him in some of the interviews. We can also see that Richard has toned down his language. He used to drop F-bombs all the time, which is fine when it's a given audience, but when your project starts to get bigger and go out into the wider community, you have to start dropping those F-bombs out of your vocabulary because it can really push people away. And he's making good efforts to do that. He can adjust his character to the audience he's speaking to. He speaks very well on camera and off camera. He knows how to work a room. He knows how to sell a product. He can write. So it's kind of the complete package. And as a result, it's a very prominent strength, and the first strength I've listed for the project. The next one is the community. So these two are intertwined. As I mentioned, he has a lot of people following him. And I can recall in one of my videos that I was speaking about, I think I was speaking about Hex, and I said, you know, it's a very good community. And there was only one person that ever pushed back and said, I'm sick of these people saying that because I buy a coin, I'm part of a community. I don't care about the community. I just want to buy the coin. Now, that was an extreme outlier, and it was in a very aggressive comment. But the only reason why I mention it now is because it couldn't have been more untrue. There are outliers who just want to get in and get out when it comes to certain coins, but that is not the case when it comes to Hex and Pulse. The community in Hex and Pulse is like no other I've ever seen. An immensely mature community, an immensely smart community, an immensely inclusive community, and an immensely open-minded community. I followed Richard Hart's lead by inviting someone on my channel to talk negatively about Hex, because I had put out a few videos talking about the positivity of Hex and the returns of Hex, and there was a few of the old crypto normies who basically abused the crap out of me, because this isn't a Hex channel, this isn't a Richard Hart channel, this is, I hope to say, a truth channel. I simply tried to find the truth and reduce your risk and create opportunities for you to make money and make advancements in your life through crypto. And many of the mainstream crypto presenters just refused to speak about Hex, and it just didn't make sense to me. And it goes back to what I was talking about. Richard Hart can be quite divisive. Now, we see great improvements with that, where people are now coming together because he's proven to deliver what he says he's going to deliver. But when I started speaking about Hex on my channel, a lot of my long-time subscribers really abused me. So what I did was I took Richard's approach and basically killed them with kindness by saying, well, great, I can see that you're frustrated. Come on the channel so we can talk about why you believe this is a scam. And I only ever had one person respond saying, okay, I'll come on the channel. His name was Hung Tran. And I said to the community when I did this video, because when you talk negatively about a project, some of the hardcore followers can get very defensive. XRP might be an example, Bitcoin Cash is an example, Bitcoin SV is another example, Ethereum versus Cardano is an example where, you know, there's some really aggressive people out there. But when I released the video with Hung Tran, who was basically saying that Hex was a scam, he didn't prove it. But why I was so impressed with the Hex community is because not one of them abused Hung for coming on the channel. None of them. And it was so inspirational because let's face it, on YouTube and in the digital space, you can go anonymous and hurl a whole lot of abuse without ever really being held accountable. And no one did that. And it just spoke volumes for the leadership of Richard and the community that he's created. That we, as crypto goers, we can get sensitive if someone hurts our feelings, and I would say that's true for anyone in life. But with the Hex community and the Pulse community, they're saying, okay, well, let me hear your argument. Instead of just shutting down the argument and saying, that's hate speech, you know, shut it down and I don't want to hear anything. That's a sign of stupidity when people do that, by the way. When you encourage debate, it's a sign of intelligence because it tests your own theories, it tests your own argument. And we see this with the Hex community and the Pulse community. And led by Richard, you can see, you say, right, come on, let me know what it is. And I followed his lead and I said to Hung, let me know what the scam is. And it wasn't proven. It was never proven with anyone who went on to Richard's channel. And the worst example I saw of someone attacking Richard was Peter McCormick. I thought it was an absolutely disgusting display of attacking someone and not the topic. That is, Peter McCormick wanted to tell the world that Hex was a scam. Richard did what Richard always does. He said, okay, come on the channel. Well, you tell me how it's a scam. And all he did was basically sit there and swear at Richard and called him absolutely disgusting words. And it was absolutely abhorrent. It truly was. But of course, Richard used it to his advantage. Richard just sat there and said, okay, now that you've finished abusing me and calling me all these names, can we talk about the project? And Peter, it's all on YouTube, you can check it out yourself. Peter said, no, you're an effing C, and just basically hung up. And that is a disgusting example of how to create a debate or talk about someone's project. That's not the way it's done. But Richard, by doing that, just proved that he's a sort of like James Bond, a cool cat, and was quite capable of sitting there and talking about what his project was doing. And he did the same thing with other people that have come onto his channel, not always talking about Hex, but talking about crypto in the broader sense. He loves debate. He's quite happy to take it on. And as a result, he's created an incredibly fantastic community. And I'd like to think I'm part of that community, but to the Hex community and the Pulse community, if you're watching this, my intent is to perhaps bridge some of the gaps between the crypto normies and the Hex and Pulse community. And I don't like to identify as any one thing or person or community because I simply seek the truth. If something is bad, let's say it's bad and find out why. And if it's good, let's say it's good, but let's find out why. We just simply want to seek the truth. And if I can help the crypto community by seeing the truth in Hex and Pulse and Richard Hart and the Hexicans and the Pulsicans, then I think that's my job in the ecosystem. But as a result, I must remain balanced and also talk about the threats and weaknesses, which we'll get to a little bit later. The next strength of this is that it's a finished product. So unlike the competitors that we spoke about before, they haven't actually finished their products. Some arguably have, because there is some type of development on them, that is, people are building on top of these projects. We have seen, as an example, Power Ledger building on top of Solana. We have seen other smaller projects such as Wi-Fi build on Cardano. There are many projects on the Binance Smart Chain, but it's arguably not finished. Those products are not finished. Now, what Pulse promises to be is a finished product when it launches. And noting how well Ethereum is already working, you could argue that Ethereum is finished, but it's not finished because they're migrating to 2.0. Now, this is fair to say for any computer software of any description, it's never finished. If you speak to any coder or developer, they will tell you it's never finished. And it's never finished because the inputs and outputs of those codes are always changing. We always have to evolve this software. But in saying that, Ethereum is finished in the sense that it works, and we've built that sort of 6 to 12 lane highway that I was describing, and the cars are driving down it. But now it's clogged and inefficient, so they have to go to a new system. And what Richard is doing through his audacious approach is by simply forking it, making sure it's robust as a proof of stake, and delivering it to the people without promises of this can and will and could do this, but rather this is working. Here it is. It's proven through what Ethereum has done. We've just gone to proof of stake. We've replicated everything that you've built over there. Come over here and use it. And as a result, this could in fact be an all-coin killer. The next strength, I think, is the huge airdrop, the biggest airdrop in the history of crypto. Now, this is exactly what I was talking about with building these parallel platforms. So we take every ERC20 coin that has been developed on Ethereum and we replicate it. Now, we call it a PERC20 for now. That is a Pulse ERC20. So imagine you've got, I'll use Chainlink as an example. So Chainlink, and there's many coins that have been built on Ethereum, but we'll stick with one for now. Imagine any Chainlink that you have is now just going to be duplicated onto the Pulse network. And you don't even have to ask for this to happen. It's just going to be there. So you're going to have your coins one day, you're going to have Chainlink, and the code for that is Link. And then the next day when this launches, you're going to have another coin called P-Link. So think about this for a second. If you're the Chainlink Foundation or the creator, you haven't done anything, but Richard's delivered you a finished product on proof of stake instead of proof of work. If you're a Chainlink holder, you haven't done anything or asked for anything to be done, but Richard's delivered to you the same coin called P-Link on the Pulse network. And if you're a Chainlink user, well, you now have the ability to use Chainlink instead of the clogged up network with gas fees. You can now use it on the Pulse network with no gas fees without doing anything. Now, you don't lose your original Link holdings, just as Chainlink doesn't lose its original product. It's just duplicated on the Pulse network. And as a result, mathematically, this is going to be the biggest airdrop in history because every ERC20 out there is going to be duplicated and airdropped to everyone who holds it. Now, I will just say this, if you've got some of your ERC20 tokens on an exchange, you want to get it into a MetaMask wallet during that snapshot period. I don't know what date that is. It should be coming pretty soon. But if you want to be part of this airdrop, make sure you've got your coins in a wallet such as MetaMask as opposed to being on a exchange. The next big strength is the deflationary supply. So I spoke about Ethereum having a liquid supply. That is, it wasn't a fixed supply and it was going up over time. Then with EIP 1559, the London hard fork, they said it's going to be a deflationary supply, meaning that they would be burning more than what they'll be creating. That has not proven to be true. That has annoyed a lot of people, myself included. But Pulse will launch with a fixed supply, and then after that supply has launched, you're going to have fees which are low, so very low. The gas fees on Ethereum, we'll say $1,000 as an example, that's the worst I've ever seen, whereas that same fee on Pulse will be arguably 1 cent. But then that fee, 25% of that fee is going to be burnt. So not only are the fees low, but 25% of them are going to be burnt during every transaction, which means it's going to be a deflationary supply, which means the price in pure economic theory, even if the demand remains constant, if the supply drops, then of course the price goes up. But what we foresee is that not only will the supply be going down, but the demand is going to go up at the same time. And when you have a decreasing supply and an increasing demand, you have exponential growth in the price. And that is something that we are all looking forward to in the launch of Pulse. The next thing is the speed. This links to the going from proof of work concept to a proof of stake concept. Proof of work is very slow and cumbersome. There are people out there who hate proof of work. I would argue Richard does as well. I say it still has value in the crypto ecosystem. I realize that's contentious for some people, but proof of work makes sense for something like Bitcoin, where it doesn't intend to do much. You can move mining farms to where the electricity is free or in excess, but that aside, proof of stake is far faster and, more importantly, better for the environment. So irrespective of how you're running these nodes and these networks in the background, they're using far less electricity than proof of work. Therefore, a proof of stake coin has a better impact on the environment, which is better for the reputation of the project as well. The next thing is it's easy. So many of the projects, as a crypto goer in this space, one of the challenges I face, which I'm sure you do as well, is when a new coin launches, first of all, you've got to figure out, well, what is it? What's the need? What's the supply? Is it proof of work, proof of stake, proof of history? Who's going to use it? Why would they use it? And then how do I use it? Well, when we go over to Pulse, it's so easy. Compare this to when we learnt Hex. Hex was very difficult for a lot of people to wrap their head around because we'd never really had anything like it before, and that's quite understandable. But Pulse is easy because we've seen how Ethereum works. As a community, we are familiar with the ecosystem of Ethereum, how it works, why it works, who would be using it, and this is now just migrating over to Pulse. So most of it is understood, but the actual back end, as I understand it, is going to be far simpler, particularly with some of the wallets he will build on this and an exchange I foresee in the future. It will just make it so much easier to work in this environment, which has already been accepted by so many people. And the next thing is, and this is really important, is that it enriches ERC20, NFTs, and Hex. I'll talk about this in a bit of detail now. So many of the projects on Ethereum, they've been retarded by the gas fees. And Hex is probably the best example of it, probably NFT and Hex. We'll go into Hex first. So Hex is not delivering what it should be because of the gas fees. Now, there are ways of working in the background and going to different platforms to reduce the gas fees, but that makes it not easy, which is part of the reasons why Pulse will be better, because it will be easier than what I'm describing about going through different dexes and swapping here using USDC at different times of the day. That's a nonsense. So as a result, that retards and slows down a lot of the projects that should be doing very well. And Hex is arguably one of the projects that is being smashed the most by the inefficiencies of Ethereum. Equally, I would say NFTs are also being smashed by the inefficiencies of Ethereum. And once Pulse launches, all of these other products will become so much better. Go back to the car analogy I was talking about. Imagine, I've given the example of, you want to go onto that highway, it's going to cost you a $500 toll to get onto that highway, and then you're going to sit in bumper to bumper traffic for hours. That's only one part of it. Imagine now, when continuing with this example, that the fuel that you put in your car is, I don't know, $100 a litre. Well, that's another inefficiency. So even if you could get on that highway during non-peak hour traffic, that is, you get into the ecosystem of Ethereum when there's low user rates and the gas fees are a bit lower, so your toll is a bit lower. Well, even then, once you're onto those networks, imagine your fuel to go through there, or the inefficiencies of going there was like paying $100 per litre of fuel and still in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And as a result, you just don't want to use your car anymore. So your car is kind of just sitting in the garage. Now, I'm not sure if I'm drawing a good analogy here, but essentially that's what's happened with so many projects that have been built on Ethereum. It's a good car and it works. But whenever you try and use it, it costs $100 per litre in fuel, and then you're stuck in a bloody traffic jam after paying a $500 toll. So what do you do with your project? That is your car. You just don't drive it. And that's what's going to happen with so many projects here into the Pulse space, is that cars that have been figuratively parked in their garage doing nothing because it was too expensive to use it and it was too slow, they're all going to come back to life. So many people are going to be enriched by what Richard is doing. And they don't even have to know him. That's why it's really exciting, because they don't even have to know or like Richard. The fact that he has created this and is just forking the biggest smart contract coin out there, the possibilities are absolutely endless, which is why we move into opportunities which are kind of a bit external now. So price performance. There are arguably two people, in simple terms, in the crypto space: the speculators and the users. The speculators, they just want to buy low, sell high. Great. They might want to stake and get some returns along the way. Great. We have to accept those people are out there. And within that, you also have, you know, the whales and the chumps and the hedge fund managers and the normal crypto goers. They're all in there to make a buck. But then you've got the people who actually need this technology. Now, many people will migrate to this, just as when the internet came out. They didn't know that they needed the internet. They didn't know that they would ever use email. They didn't know that they would use servers. And we'll see more people come into using crypto, whether they like it or not, just as a speculator, but as part of everyday business. But in any case, the price performance metrics of Pulse are absolutely mind-boggling. First of all, you have that fixed supply. Then it's deflationary, because it'll come out not being a liquid supply like Ethereum with an unfixed supply that can go up or down. This will initially be fixed, saying that this is the hard cap. And then, of course, with those gas fees being burnt, or those transaction fees being burnt, that is 25% in every transaction. Well, of course, the supply gets lower and lower and lower. And as I mentioned, Economics 101, even if you have a fixed demand, if the supply goes down, the price will increase. But of course, when we have an increasing demand with a reducing supply, and that demand is increasing because many people will, first of all, immediately migrate over from Ethereum straight onto Pulse without doing anything, but then more people will come on and say, well, hang on, where else am I going to build? I'm going to go build on that one that's very efficient, is working very fast, has proven to work with what's been established on Ethereum, has proven to be working with the migration that's happened there. that is in fact going to create a massive demand on every Pulse token. Now, of course, then you have the speculators who refuse to sell. And when you have projects such as liquid loans that say you don't need to sell, you can extract value out of your Pulse token by simply putting it into liquid loans and taking out the USDL token on that and never paying back the loan. If the price continues to go up, that's going to create even more pressure on the supply, as people just aren't going to let it go. So Richard's not going to be minting more. The speculators will be holding it and taking value out of it through something like liquid loans. The demand will be increasing because so many people will be coming into the space saying, I need this, combined with the gas fees being burnt at 25% per transaction. Mate, the price could just go absolutely ballistic. And that is why I released a video with Crypto 7 talking about, could this be the next 10,000x crypto? Now remember, Hex did 10,000x, which just rhymed, by the way. And we've seen Ethereum do thousands of X as well. I think it's 14,000X. So a 10,000X in crypto is not a dream. It's very probable. Now, if you speak to a normie outside of crypto, they'll be like, oh, 10,000X, that's a scam. It's like, pff, all right, you go play on your 1% per annum on the stock exchange. The grown-ups, the new grown-ups, will be playing in the crypto space, getting your 10,000X returns, possibly 15,000X, 20,000X. Will it hit that? I don't know, not financial advice. But if it were to do what Ethereum did, you're going to get that 14,000x. If it's going to do what Hex did, you're going to get 10,000x. And if you're going to do what Bitcoin did, well, the sky's the limit. Hundreds of thousands, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of X. And that is why, let's face it, the main hype around this is the price performance. That is not giving any discredit to all of the other parts of this project, but you have to be realistic. Most people are very excited about that price, and this coin, if everything works, is poised to do an immensely impressive display of price pumping, but not because it's going to be dumped, but through legitimate requirements and needs of the market. So another opportunity, as I mentioned before, is every single ERC20 project already made. So you say, well, what's your market share? And the market share, of course, can be, you look at what your competitors have. You want to get some of what your competitors have got, but look at what's already been built on Ethereum. And when that is created on Pulse or duplicated on Pulse, it's already there. Now, will these people use it? Some people can say, yes, it's absolutely going to be used. And I think it's reasonable to say, yes, many people will migrate over because, well, look, it works over here. We've made your cafe identically to what you've got over there, but it's free parking. You've got just as many customers. You know how the kitchen works because it's all duplicated exactly the same. Just come over here where your electricity bills are almost nothing and your customers know how you work and you know your way around the kitchen. So just come over here. And that's what we foresee with every ERC project that's already been made. Just migrate over. It's already there and it's free. And the fees are so low and it moves so much faster. So that is a huge opportunity for this project. And then we go to every competitor's current and future market share. So you look at all the competitors, and I only outlined 5 at the beginning of this video, but there are many more competitors to Ethereum than just those 5. There are so many competitors out there. And I listed 6, but one of them was Ethereum. So, but we're kind of leaving that as an outlier here because this is forking Ethereum and we're taking all the Ethereum's network with us. But now we're also going to take the Cardano network with us. That is all the people who are using the Cardano network if and when they go onto there. And of course, all the Binance Smart Chain and the Polkadot and the Algorands and the Solanas as well. So you're taking every single competitor's current market share, but their future market share as well. So think about that. Ethereum already has a massive market share. We've got them, great. But then you take all the competitors' market share and their future market share, and you combine that with the price performance that is a reducing supply and diamond hands holding on to this. The potential for this to go massive is beyond comprehension. It is absolutely mind-boggling. And in fact, when I did an interview with Charles Carroll, he asked me a question about what do you think the price performance is. I got really present in that interview, and I actually remember getting like little tingles down my body. And I tried to tell my body, hang on, calm down. You know, you've been in crypto for long enough. You've seen things go bad. You've seen the best projects in the world that should work not perform. And you've seen the worst projects in the world that should not do well. They do perform. So I try and remain very balanced. But the truth is, I've got to be honest with you, many things are through my experience in business, in crypto, in money, in finance, and trying to be balanced. This is just looking so strong, and the opportunities for the market share in this is just, it's beyond comprehension. And then we go further into future projects. So not even just what the competitors are doing, but of course, smart contracts, NFTs. NFTs are the big one. I argue that everything will be an NFT. Don't worry about your JPEG arts. That's just the first thing on it. Don't worry about that stuff. Everything will be an NFT when it comes to land titles, your driver's license, your birth certificate, your ownership for your house. It all just makes sense. Why wouldn't it be an NFT? I also argue that movie tickets and bus tickets, collectibles, we already know about this, they will all be NFTs, and they can all be built on Pulse. So not just taking the current competitors' market share and their future market share, will go into new markets. We'll be taking and making new stable coins, new staking opportunities, DEXs, DAOs, store of value, medium of exchange, and more. And I mentioned the store of value, medium of exchange, and more because if you know what a store of value, medium of exchange, and a unit of account is, well, that is money. Now, all cryptos are arguably money because you can store value there and you can move it around. Every coin can do that one way or another. Yes, some are more efficient than others, but ultimately, all cryptocurrencies can do that. But the difference with Pulse, I keep going back to Hex, my apologies, but the difference with Pulse is that we can move this value very quickly. So story time with Uncle Adam, a lot of my service providers around the world, they want to be paid in different cryptocurrencies. And what was interesting to me is in the past, many of them wanted to be paid in Ethereum. Well, they've all pulled out of that now. They said they don't want Ethereum. Most of my providers actually want Litecoin. They want Litecoin because it's a very stable coin. If you look at the fluctuation in the prices of Litecoin, it's kind of consistent. Sure, there's volatility in there, but it's not like a Shiba Inu or a Dogecoin. It's a lot more stable. But some people want different coins. Now, the reason why I mention Pulse being a store of value, medium of exchange, and a unit of account, well, it's difficult to have crypto as a unit of account for now because of its volatility. But at least if it's going up in value, most people are happy with that. But I foresee people will want Pulse sent to them for payments. And that's where it will become a money in itself, which creates even more pressure on it in the sense that there's more demand on it now. And of course, if there's more demand with even less supply, the price just continues to go up. So I'm really excited to see how it will be worked in smart contracts, NFTs, stablecoin, staking, DEX, DAOs, store of value, medium exchange, and way more. Finally, it improves other projects by enforcing migration to the PulseChain. So this kind of links to the last point within the strengths where I was talking about it enriches ERC20s such as NFTs and Hex, etc. But it improves a lot of projects that have been slowed down from these gas fees. And as a result, these projects that say, right, I'm not going to go with Pulse. I'm just going to stay on Ethereum because I'm scared of change and I'm loyal to Ethereum. Well, first of all, when they don't have to do anything and they can just look that way and say, oh, well, it's actually working over there and it's free and it's got lower gas fees. So on one hand, if I stay in Ethereum, it's okay in Ethereum because now all of that traffic in Ethereum has gone. So the highways have opened up a bit more. So the toll has dropped a little bit and I can move a bit faster. And it's like, well, great. I'm now paying half the toll. So instead of paying a $500 toll or gas fee, I now pay a $250 gas fee. And instead of taking 4 hours to do a transaction or get to work, it's now only taking 2 hours. Well, sure, you've now made Ethereum better by reducing a lot of the pressure on it, but it's still nothing compared to what's happening on Pulse. So even if they say, go back to my cafe example, where they say, right, I'll reduce your rent by half and I'll give all your customers half price parking. Well, that's great. Thank you for the half price rent and half price parking. But if I'm going to that new Pulse town, I'm now paying 1,000th of the parking and a 1,000th, if I can't even say that word, of the rent. And my customers get to come here for free. It kind of doesn't really matter what type of reduction you do on my restaurant over there. I'm going to migrate over there. And the same is true for all of these projects. They will naturally migrate over to where it's easier. And if they don't, the customers will simply move from it. For example, if I'm using the Chainlink Oracle example, if it costs me so much to use Chainlink and I have an alternative over at Pulse, whether that's P-Link or a competitive, the market will naturally migrate to where there's less friction. Think of markets like water. Water will kind of seek its own level and naturally flow to where it's got the least amount of resistance. And even if a big rock is dropped in the middle of it and tries to stop the flow of that water, eventually the water will find its way around that rock. And that is true with most markets. If you look how markets behave, you could go into it metaphorically saying humans are made up mostly of water, but just follow the money. Money will eventually trickle to where it's able to flow freely. And that is why fiat will fail, because it's in market failure. It's this big rock that's stopping the natural flow of value through ecosystems, and eventually that rock will be eroded. Okay, let's go into the weaknesses and threats. So I put this out to anyone who says that whenever they're reviewing a project, my project has no weaknesses or threats. Those people are either idiots or liars, because every project everywhere has weaknesses and threats. Any product, any market, by anyone at any time in history has a weakness and a threat. And if you're unable to look at those weaknesses and threats, you're standing to fail. Even if you want to build your own businesses, you really want to actively reach out to the weaknesses and threats. Why? Because those are the areas that you improve. If you're sitting in business only looking at, oh, I'm good at this and I'm good at that, well, that's great. You're good at that. What are you going to do? You need to look at your weaknesses and threats to be able to improve and become almost untouchable. And I like to use sporting analogies here, because if you look at the best sportsmen, they don't actually focus on what they're really good at. They focus on improving in training what they're bad at. Now, on the game day, certainly they leverage off their strengths and opportunities to win the game. But during training, they recognize, oh, I'm not really good at picking up the ball here, or making this shot there, or taking on this pitch here. I really need to work on that to make my weakness and threat better and stronger, or not creating such a vulnerability in my game. And the same is with business. If you are running your own business, you need to identify your own weaknesses and threats so you can improve that. And if you can't find them, go external. Ask someone else. Say, hey, this is my business. Don't worry about your ego. Put your ego aside. You can put it back on later. Just put it down like a hat and you can wear it later. But to make sure that you succeed, find your weaknesses and threats. And I give this to the Pulse community, and even to Richard to an extent, but he's smart enough to figure this out himself. But you need to consider this also as a speculator and investor. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, not even Pulse, not even Bitcoin, no, not even Hex. Nothing but death and taxes is guaranteed. Okay, that rant aside, getting you prepared for the weaknesses. The first one is, I would argue, is in fact the founder. Now, hear me out. At the beginning of this presentation, I told you how Richard is very divisive, and that doesn't work well in business. Sure, you stand by your values. Sure, you stand up to truth. Sure, you tell it how it is. But there are times in business and diplomacy that you kind of need to play the game. Now, Richard is doing this in the sense that he's toned down his swearing. He's not so aggressive in many people that are coming forward, because he's proven that he knows his stuff and he's going to deliver. But one of the most interesting jobs I ever had in my life was actually as the host nation liaison officer for Australia in, I can't tell you where, it was an undisclosed location. But what I learned in that position was the rule of diplomacy. And I found that certain nations have far more diplomatic maturity than other nations. And I would argue the first world nations have this maturity because they've gone through the trials and tribulations of war, of economic failure, and they've figured out over time that sometimes you just got to bite your tongue and play the game, because a little lose today will be a big win tomorrow. And that is arguably diplomatic maturity. And some of the aggressive styles of Richard push a lot of people out of the community. And it's no secret. He's very divisive. Now, again, I see him improving on this. I see him becoming more diplomatically mature. I see him becoming more in control of his language with the F-bombs. I see him becoming more calmer as he becomes older and richer. Now, don't get me wrong. The guy is immensely kind. He works the room very well. He's very giving. He's very knowledgeable. He'll take on any criticism. But you know what I mean. If you're in the Hex community and the Pulse community, you should be nodding in the background saying, yeah, I get what you mean. And I think even Richard understands this himself. So that may be one of the weaknesses initially, because it pisses off a lot of people. So if you can draw that back, that will be turned into a strength. But the other thing is, some have argued, is he a central point of failure? Now, I don't think he is, but it's not just about me, and it's not just about you, it's about the market. And if the market believes that this whole project will collapse because Richard's not there, that can become a weakness for the project. Again, I think he's created robust systems that certainly if he dies tomorrow, Hex will live on. But if he died tomorrow, after making this video, would Pulse live on? I don't know. I mean, who else is on the Pulse team? I know they're there. But does he have a board of directors? And if he doesn't have a board of directors, well, why not? And this is a very dangerous situation. When you're making a multi-billion-dollar company and organization, you need redundancy. Look at the strongest countries in the world. They have a president and a vice president. Look at any board for any business. They have a chair and a vice chair. I haven't seen that with Pulse. I haven't seen that with Hex. Now, again, Hex is kind of the fixed code. Arguably, when Pulse launches, that will be a code that just launches and you tick along. But as we know with software needs to be developed and updated regularly. And I'm concerned, legitimately, You can love Richard all you want, as much as I do as well. I think he's a bloody legend. But if he's dead tomorrow, what happens to Pulse? And I don't have an answer to that. So it's something that next time I speak to Richard, I'll raise this with him and I want to get his insight. And I'm sure he's got insight into it. He'll definitely have an answer, but it is most certainly something we must consider. The next one is it's gate kept. So we saw this with Hex, that it's actually a strength and a weaknesses, and something that is strong can also be weak. So we saw the performance of Hex without it ever being listed on an exchange, without ever getting any mainstream promotion. In fact, it got the opposite to mainstream promotion. It got mainstream smashing. With all the conflict in the community, it still went up. So using Hex as an example, we can see that a gate-kept project still did immensely well, but there is no secret, and even Richard has said this himself, that, imagine this went mainstream. Imagine how much money could be made from Hex. And we all say that when we look at any project that is gate kept, when it's kind of small and kept in tight, it reduces a lot of opportunity for fresh money to come in. Of course, the community within crypto, within Hex and within Pulse are so strong and so brilliant that they themselves maintain an immense amount of strength in both the Hex and Pulse project. But it is still something to consider. When you're looking at a weakness such as this, it's a gate-kept project. And again, this is where I try to do my part to help Richard, to help you, to help the investor, to help the community, to help possibly the world, noting that this is going to be very big for many people, is I hope to act as that bridge to say, hang on, look past all the noise and look at what is actually happening here, and look at the reality of A, what Richard has delivered, and B, what Ethereum is failing to deliver, and C, what the competitors are also failing to deliver. And the truth will seek out. Once videos such as this get out and the truth in the market gets out, with more people talking about it and hopefully some more mainstream crypto commentators talking about it, hopefully that weakness of it being gate kept will fade away. This kind of links into the perception. So let's face it, perception is reality for many people. And when it comes to investment, some of that perception is reality. Shiba Inu is great, so boom, it goes to the moon. Then we realize it's not good, and that reality comes back and it comes crashing back down. Maybe Shiba Inu will work well, maybe it won't. Then we look at Dogecoin. Dogecoin was made as a meme coin, and even though many people perceived it as a meme coin in the early days, once it started pumping, many people perceived it as an asset that was going to make him a lot of money, and perception becomes people's reality. Now, if people look at the Hex and Pulse community as outliers and they perceive it as one big scam, that can be a weakness for the project. Of course, we can see that this is shifting as many people, they write to Richard saying, thank you for changing my life. Thank you for making me all of this money. If you look at the Sense Foundation, he's donated all of this money that could extend lives for many people around the world for years to come. Now, that will change the perception, but I still think if I was the host nation liaison officer for Pulse, working on the global stage, this would actually be my number one thing, the perception of Pulse and Hex. That would be my main focus, to change the brand to, we are not this outlier. We are not some crazy kind of organization doing something to do a rug pull or be a pump and dump. We are actually delivering this for this reason, and this is the outcomes that we're going to achieve. Now we go into the threats. And again, those were all the only weaknesses I could come up with. So if you've got more weaknesses, I really encourage you to put it in there. Put your ego aside. And if you hate this project, it's going to be easy for you to put the weaknesses in there. But if you love it, really challenge yourself. Really say, right, what are some of the weaknesses for this? You're not going to hurt yourself. And if you find a weakness, you say, well, how do I counter that weakness? So then we go on to the threats. Now, remember, weaknesses are more internal to the organization and threats are more external. And I acknowledge that perception could be seen as more external, but some of them do kind of overlap. So competitors, in any SWOT analysis, that's your number one threat. It's like a throwaway threat that you can easily put on any project. Any project, anywhere, has a competitor. Now, you might say, well, diamonds don't, because diamonds have this centralized Demirs who bought all the diamonds, locked them away. But that is not entirely true. There are, in fact, some other diamond producers or miners. Sure, a very small percentage, but it's still a competitor. And you must respect your competitors. So if you read The Art of War, a lot of it is really respecting your enemy and understanding them. Don't just dismiss them. You're an idiot if you do that. If you just dismiss your enemy, you're gonna get blockbusted. Look at what Blockbuster did. They laughed at these boys that came in and said, hey, we've got this Netflix concept. You want to buy it for $1 million? Haha, you idiot, get out of here. Well, look who's laughing now. Those arrogant idiots who were unable to see what was happening around them, they have now become a verb. The verb for being an idiot in business and not understanding how to evolve and look at the competition, That's now a verb. You're going to get blockbusted. And in any business you do, if you don't look at the competitors, and in this example, specifically ETH 2.0, you're going to get blockbusted. You're going to get wrecked. And I argue this. The biggest threat to all of this is ETH 2.0. I say it's an arms race. I say that if Ethereum 2.0 launches before Pulse, I just don't see how Pulse has a chance. Now, I realize this is triggering to a lot of people, but just think about this. The whole foundation of everything that Pulse is doing is forking Ethereum to go to proof of stake. Now, if Ethereum beats Pulse to that, and Ethereum, let's say just hypothetically, tomorrow says, surprise, we're now on proof of stake. All of those gas fees have now gone down to 1 cent. Our 6-lane highway is now 800 lanes wide. There's almost no toll. There's no waiting time. Well, where does Pulse fit in there? Now, you could say, well, we've got a fixed supply and this and that. Well, of course, EIP 1559 was the first step to that. You've got the layer 2 solutions now. You've got the proof of stake versus proof of work. You've got the reputation and the network effect. That is a legitimate and massive threat to this project. And anyone who dismisses that saying, no, that doesn't matter, it's not going to happen, don't get blockbusted. Don't turn into those board members who said, we don't want your Netflix thing. And just think about Netflix also. What's so amazing about Netflix is Netflix was competing, and I use the Netflix example here because it goes back to the opportunities of Pulse. So when you think about Netflix, their business initially was just passing around movies that were already made by someone else. We're going to rent them out to you some way. The business model in the past was you put it on a cassette tape or a DVD, and then you rent it out, this physical thing, to the market, and then the market gives it back, and that creates huge inefficiencies. And Netflix was coming in saying, well, we will just take that physical thing and make it a digital file, and then we'll be able to pass it around with less friction. And it worked. But fast forward, and what does Netflix do now? Well, Netflix isn't competing with Blockbuster. First of all, they've destroyed them. They're actually now competing with Hollywood. Netflix makes its own movies. They have their own budgets with their own actors, their own directors, and their own vision of how the world's moving forward. And I would suggest that Hollywood needs to be very careful, because I would suggest that as Hollywood is becoming so SJW and creating movies that all they care about is pushing forward some type of political narrative, they're going to get blockbusted. You will see, instead of it saying Hollywood on the Hollywood Hills, imagine a world where it says Netflix on the Hollywood Hills. Now, of course, Hollywood is a location, and for your reference, that Hollywood sign is actually owned by an Australian, which is quite funny. But because they have done so well, Netflix has now gone into industries outside of what they were originally aimed to do. And I would suggest that perhaps Pulse could do the same thing. Pulse could be so successful that it originally went to compete against Ethereum and its immediate competitors, but it could become so big that it could do so many things that I can't even see on the horizon yet. Just as Netflix didn't think that they would be competing with Hollywood, they thought they were only competing with Blockbuster. I think the same is true for many cryptocurrencies out there. They think they're competing with one thing, then they realize they have so much power, so much money, so much market share, so much momentum that they in fact start competing with other industries. The next one is a God whale dump. Look, mathematically it doesn't make sense, but again, this is kind of a throwaway one. There has been arguments, and it's such an accusation that it wasn't proven true with Hex, but the argument was with Hex that Richard had all the coins, he was the God whale, and he was going to dump it. Well, the example he gives is, actually I won't repeat the example he gives because it's quite explicit, but I'll paraphrase it. He said, would Elon Musk destroy his own business by selling sex toys instead of cars? And it was a really good example because, yeah, why would you destroy your own business? Why would you suddenly say, right, I'm going to dump, if Richard Hart is the God whale, if he has all the Hex, the most amount of Hex and the most amount of Pulse, I don't know if he does. I'm not making an accusation for or against this, but let's say hypothetically he does. The argument is he's going to dump it. Well, they'll just destroy his own project. And the good thing about Richard is that he's so rich. This is why you actually want some leaders to be very rich, because they can't be bought. They can't be bribed. And as a result, they're free to just allow, in many ways, their ego take them forward. And the good part about Richard's ego is that he's not in this for the money. He's already got the money. He's got enough money to not even worry about anything. He's in this now for the reputation, and that's good for us. That's good for us as speculators and investors and enthusiasts and business operators, because We don't want this guy to do a rug pull or a dump, and I don't think he's going to do either of those because he's too interested in helping other people and building his reputation and leaving a legacy. And I think his legacy, again, I must ask this the next time I speak to him, I think his legacy in life will be Hex and Pulse and creating an immense amount of positive impact to so many crypto investors. And then that will expand to more than just the crypto goers, more than just the investors and the speculators. It will spill over to larger parts of society. Just as the internet and computers initially were only for nerds and geeks, well, who doesn't use a computer now? And what Gates has done, wrongly or rightly, has had a huge impact on the world. What the internet has done has had a huge impact on the world. And the same will be for crypto. And if Richard can be part of that impact in a positive light, I think that is his legacy, which is why I don't think he will ever dump. But if there is a God whale that isn't Richard Hart and they dump, well, maybe that is a threat and something that you cannot deny and something you must consider. Next, we have a coding bug. Now, this, of course, is not unique to Pulse or any code. A coding bug is a real issue and a real threat to any software. Now, of course, we've seen bugs in Bitcoin. We've seen bugs in Ethereum. In fact, we had such a bug in Ethereum that it forked. It had to fork from what is now Ethereum Classic to what is Ethereum today. And we've seen it in Solana. We've seen it in pretty much all cryptos and codes. There has been a bug where something has gone wrong. So I don't think this is a showstopper. I think coding bugs can be fixed, but it is still a threat that you have to consider. And if you look at the Ethereum example, the coding bug was such a threat that they actually had to hard fork off itself. It had to create a new Ethereum, and it seems to be working up until the point that it's clogged and expensive. And the final one, of course, is regulation. And you'll note that these are kind of non-specific to Pulse. These are applicable to all cryptos. Regulation, I say, is one of the greatest threats to everything we do in crypto. The biggest threat to me in my business for the crypto land, the crypto.land, is in fact regulation of my own government. It's nothing against my government and it's nothing against the regulators. They've got a job to do, but regulation and government stifle innovation. They legitimately stifle innovation. Now, their intent isn't to stifle innovation. Their intent is to ensure that they get paid their taxes, stop terrorism, so they say, and make sure bad stuff doesn't happen. And as a result, they put these rules and these regulations onto the entire marketplace, and that stifles innovation. Because now, instead of trying to innovate and create a good product, you're now writing up documents and legal frameworks to appease the regulators that are stifling innovation. And I say this on the global scale, that any country that tries to overregulate crypto, they will lose. And I'm concerned about first world nations who have taken their financial prowess for granted for many years. They think they can just regulate the crap out of everyone. And what will happen is you have capital flight. People just pick up and go to where they're treated best. They'll just pick up all their money, all their knowledge, all their opportunities and go to a country, and you'll see a shift. Mark my words, you'll see a shift in these countries rising from second and developing worlds coming up to being the first world as the innovators move to those worlds where they are not regulated. Now, I hope Pulse is not overregulated, just as I hope that no crypto is overregulated, but it is certainly a threat for this and any other project. Okay, so that's a SWOT analysis there. As you can see, the strengths and opportunities, they way outnumber the weaknesses and threats. And even with the threats, they're kind of applicable to so many different cryptocurrencies. So I encourage us all as a community, leave the comments below. Just write strength something, or opportunity something, or weakness something. Let's stimulate conversation. And don't be shy, if you're a supporter of this, to highlight what you think is a weakness. And the reason why we want to do this is because, we want this project to work. I want this project to work. I've sacrificed for this project, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Identifying a weakness doesn't make the project weak. It actually will make it stronger, because then the developers can go, oh yeah, I need to make sure that that's working, and I need to fix this, and I need to make this more robust. Equally, if you want to put some stuff in there for the strengths, I could only fit so much on here, and I didn't want to talk forever about the strengths. I think there are more strengths, but please do leave them in the comments below, because we are one community and we do want to look at the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats of something that we have invested in.